God is experienceable. Whatever you think about God, God is experienceable. Not at some future time and place. Because whenever you have that experience, it will be right now, right where you are right now. And that moment will be just like this moment. What we're looking for, we must look for now. And we'll find it if we look for it now. And if we look for it here, we'll find it. We won't find it there because that's in space, and then because that's in time. What we're looking for is not to be found in time and space, but in the timelessness and the spacelessness of one's own beingness. And we will find it when we rise up into its nature within ourselves, because its nature is ourself. Now, on this journey toward our spiritual self, I saw one of our things. The road to your spiritual identity is marked with tempting parking spaces. And it shows some people parked along the way. We stop along the way, don't we? Of course we do. And sometimes as we pause, it's a very good thing to examine ourselves, to find out who it is that I am and where is it that I think I'm going. Because I can't get there unless I know where I'm going, and I can't get there unless I begin to know something of who I am. Plato said that the unexamined life is not worth living. And I tell you that the unexamined life is a painful experience that becomes increasingly more painful as one moves forward on that road, not knowing where they're going. And the person who lives the unexamined life will have very little inner identity. And you can almost always tell such a person because they'll be seeking their good in outer things that will somehow always seem to elude them. Oh, they will find it. They will find it. There it is, right there. Hold still now. And it doesn't do it. And he who looks for himself, for his good in outer things, will ultimately, in the pain that comes, because our good is always eluding us out there, that pain will eventually cause us to turn to God, but such a one will turn to an outer God. And then that outer God will always say, will always not respond. And then that person will say, God said no. And all the while that the Spirit of the universe is waiting patiently inside, waiting for one to begin to examine themselves with the willingness to throw away all that is not real, all that is not necessary, because where we're going to have to travel light. We cannot carry the heaviness of ourselves there. We cannot carry our suffering, our wounds, our anger, our resentments, nor can we carry this collection of human concepts that we have brought together over the years of our experience. Now, when we begin to examine ourselves and throw away everything that we're not, one day we'll find that what is left is what we are. And it's what we were all the time. It's the self that we've been all the time. And you see, only this self can find God. For this self is of God. It's the self that God made. In finding our real self, we find God because we find the self that can find God. In fact, that self and God are already in conscious contact with each other. Now, in coming face to face with yourself, you'll find in the beginning that this can be a very terrifying experience. The reason is that once upon a time in this life, you started out as someone's little girl or someone's little boy. And you were given a name, an identity, and you were told a number of things about yourself, and you figured out some other things about yourself along the way. And when we come face to face with that self, it can be disturbing in the beginning, but only in the beginning. In a little while, it becomes the most exciting and refreshing and rewarding and exhilarating experience that is imaginable. Listen to what Meister Eckhart said a long time ago. As soon as a man turneth himself in spirit, and with his whole heart and mind entereth into the mind of God which is above time, all that ever he hath lost is restored to him. And if a man were to do this 1,000 times in a day, each time a fresh and real union would take place. For he who hath attained thereto asketh nothing further. For he hath found the kingdom of heaven and eternal life on earth right now. And Rufus Jones said, in these deeper reaches of experience, some higher power seems to work with us and through us. A larger life, continuous with ourselves, seems to environ us. Our own consciousness appears to be only an effective center in a vast spiritual environment which acts along with us. How would you like to live the life that we've just heard about? So that your own mind, your own nature is merely a center through which a larger, more beautiful, divine somethingness flows. And yet, it's the most natural experience that you can possibly imagine. And you stand in that experience constantly in the stream of solutions, not of problems. And with an awakening, quickening sense of joy and beauty. Do you believe that's possible for you? I know that it's possible for you. And I know that it's possible for me. And I know that that is our destiny, that's our goal. But I also know that each one of us must fulfill the conditions for this experience. And then we can have it. Carl Jung wrote, human thought cannot conceive any system of final truth that could give the patient what he needs in order to live, that is, faith, hope, love, and insight. These four highest human achievements of human effort are so many gifts of grace which are neither to be taught nor learned, since they come through experience, which is something given, and therefore beyond the reach of human caprice. The way to experience, moreover, is anything but a clever trick. It is rather a venture which requires us to commit ourselves with our whole being. It is rather a venture which requires us to commit ourselves with our whole being. And is that not the last thing that we have ever really wanted to do? To commit ourselves? You know what a venture is. You remember some of the great ventures, the adventures that man individually and collectively has taken. When you begin a venture, that's not just a simple little something. That requires the allness, the total commitment, the resources, the vitality, the energy. Now, if you and I are going to enter into this highest of all experiences, can it be simply because we say, pass the potatoes? Gosh, I think I would like that. It sure would be nice, God, and If it's your will, here I am. You think it can be like that? No. Now, we agree that human thought cannot conceive a system that will take us beyond itself. Can the human mind give you a system that will take you beyond the human mind? Absolutely not. It cannot go beyond itself. And as a matter of fact, it does not want you to go beyond it, and it is the only devil that you will ever experience. It will speak to you and it will lie to you. You bet it will. But spirit thought, God thought, the mind of God in us has surely devised a system that will take us to its self. It will deliver us. It will deliver us to it if we give it permission and if we cooperate with the system that it has already devised for that purpose. Now, the only thing that you and I are ever going to be delivered from is ourselves, our human condition. That's the greatest dis-ease on earth. And all diseases are a reflection of that human condition, that human dis-ease. Now, if our spiritual identity is already established as a reality, and it is, therefore not something to be developed in our own minds, then surely the mind that thought of this reality and has provided it for us has given us a way to experience it. Would you, with your child, would you provide it with some great good? Something that it seeks with all its heart and needs and desires and reaches for and hold it constantly beyond its grasp? Would you do that? Then do you think that God or this creative intelligence, call it what you will, has designed this fantastic universe and the fullness of life and is dangling it beyond you and will not permit you to have it until you reach some distant star? No. If it's available at all, it's available now. And the way to it has been provided for us. However, that great self cannot force us into this experience. You and I must choose it, and not only must we choose the experience, but we must also choose to take the steps that get us there. I must choose the conditions that permit me to have the experience. Again, Rufus Jones said, I don't know who he was, but I like what he says, so I'll read it to you. It's not an uncommon experience for persons who are entirely free from abnormality to have an experience in which the meaning, the significance, the worth, the richness of life vastly transcends their concepts and descriptions. When life vastly overflows all that can be said about it, at the highest moments of appreciation there comes not a loss of consciousness, but the emergence of a new level of consciousness. Now, for persons who are entirely free from abnormality, I have not met one yet. Have you? You who are entirely free, raise your right hand. Mine is behind my back. Now, what does this really mean? Entirely free, or willing to be free from our human condition. We are free from the limiting ideas. We're willing to let go of our old ideas, our resentments, our suffering, our dis-ease, our hate. And such a person will experience not a loss of consciousness, but the emergence of a new level of consciousness. And you and I have been seeking together these past weeks to enter into, at a higher level, this new state of beingness. And we believe that we've found a way into it, to enter into that state of mind that is there waiting patiently for us. And we've found a system that will permit us to put off the old and put on the new. But let me read to you something from the 5th chapter of Luke, the 36th through the 39th verses. And Jesus, the master teacher, was talking to his disciples. They were asking him about this state of consciousness and the entering into it, and why did not more people accept the idea. Then Jesus used this illustration. No one tears off a piece of a new garment to make a patch for an old one. Not only will the new garment be ruined, but the old garment will look worse with a new patch on it. Isn't that a graphic description of how things are? I'll bet you that there's not a single lady here who has ever taken a brand new dress and torn a section out of it to repair an old one. You've never done that, have you? Because you ruined the new one, and the old one will look worse than it did before you started. And no one puts new wine into old wineskins, for the new wine bursts the old skins, ruining the skins and spilling the wine. You see, new wine is a fermenting, expanding thing. And new wineskins will stretch. They were the skins of animals, and they would stretch. But once they had dried out, they would not stretch, and if you put this expanding wine in the old skins, you lost both. You didn't have either. Now, the new wine must be put into new wineskins. But no one, after drinking the old wine, seems to want the fresh and the new. This is a new wine. This is a new kind of thinking. This is a new experience. But, he said, they will say, the old ways are best. The old ways are best. Have you not felt that? Have you not heard someone else make that statement? The old ways are best. It's so difficult for us to put on these new ideas, because when you're in the process of doing it, here come one of the old limiting concepts, and it's so easy to fall right back into that experience. Let me read to you from a book that came through a group of men and women who were having this experience and solving problems that had no solution at the human level as the result of this experience in their life. It's chapter 5 of this book, How It Works. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Our stories, our lives, disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we're like now. If you've decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you're ready to take certain steps. At some of these, we balked. We thought we could find an easier, softer way. But we could not. With all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go, absolutely. Remember that we deal with the human consciousness, our human condition. Cunning, baffling, powerful. Without help, it's too much for us. But there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now. Half measures availed us nothing. We stood at the turning point. We asked his protection and care with complete abandon. And here are the steps we took. We admitted that we were powerless, that we could not manage our own lives. 2, we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to its sanity. And remember, we have been taking these steps together these last weeks. But fall now, if you will, back into the consciousness, the feeling of the step as I read it to you. We then made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. 4, we made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. We began to examine ourselves, our minds, our lives, to look back and see what had happened to us and what was our reaction to this experience over all of our lives. And 5, we admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs or of our experience. And 6, last week our step was we were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects. We were entirely ready to have God fix us, restore us. And tonight our step is humbly ask him to remove our shortcomings. The other steps, 8, 9, through 12 are there. I will not read them to you. But the reading continues. Many of us exclaimed, "What an order! I can't go through with it." Do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We are not saints. The point is that we're willing to grow along spiritual lines. Our personal adventures before and after make clear three pertinent ideas: that we could not manage our own lives, that probably no human power could have helped us, and three, that God could and would. But there's a condition. If he were salt. If he were salt. That's a condition. Tonight, that's a condition that we're going to consider for just a little while. But first, let me tell you that so many of you have been telling me of the marvelous things that you've been discovering about yourselves, the insights that you've had. Yesterday, someone who's here tonight told me that earlier this week she had a dream. It was a very vivid dream, many details that aren't necessary for me to tell you. But in this dream she was in a prison camp, except it was outside. There were no boundaries seemingly in it. And yet she could not escape. She could not leave it. And the dream was filled with color and some great meaning that she knew that was there for her, and when she awakened she asked God to reveal to her what the dream meant. And she was shown that she was supposed to get serious about her inventory, to examine her life and list all the things that were keeping her in prison, all of the ideas that imprison us in that small courtyard in which we live our lives. Do you know that within you is an imprisoned splendor? What is imprisoning your God self, your Christ self? What is it that's keeping you from expanding out and demonstrating the prosperity and beauty and love that reigns within your own heart? And that's what an inventory is about. Now, you think that everyone wants out of prison? Do you believe that everyone wants out of prison? Do you believe that everyone that's in prison wants out? Read today's Free Press. The convict who was paroled earlier this year, who served the longest time ever served in a Michigan penitentiary, 54 years, wants to go back home. He said, "I want to go back and be with my friends." The old ways are better, aren't they? The restrictions are comfortable. But he requested from the warden permission to return, and they have no authority to return him to his 6 by 10 foot cell with its bare cement floor and empty walls. Now, if you think that this person is very much different from this person that you are, examine this person and see how large is the confinement in which you have decided that you'll be contained, the rest of your life. Someone told me just before class tonight that as a result of an inventory, she said, "I really got honest with myself and recognized the fact that I have expected all financial matters to always be a struggle. I have always believed that one must struggle to earn a living." She said that's the way it's been all of my life. It's been that way until today. It doesn't have to be that way any longer. The moment that you can recognize one of the bars that keep you in that prison, you can eliminate it. And you can step forth into your freedom. And now we're talking about another step in our movement toward that larger freedom that is yours to experience and mine to experience. And it's step number 7 of our 12 steps to a spiritual experience. And step 7 states, humbly ask God to remove my shortcomings. Humbly ask God to fix me, to restore me, to change me, to heal me. But how can I do this if there's nothing wrong with me? If I'm okay, if it's just that outer thing that needs fixing, like more money in my bank account, or the alcoholic wife who wants her husband fixed, but he doesn't want to be fixed. Well, you know how that goes. No, this deals with me, with my mind, with the restoration, with me returning to my real self, to my real identity. Now let's examine this power-packed and love-filled principle at depth, because on the surface, it looks like something that almost everyone does every day, maybe several times a day. Humbly ask God to remove my shortcomings? Gosh, I think I did that 3 times before lunch. Don't be too certain, because when we get into the deeper significance of it, we may discover that we have never done it ever in our lives, not once. I promise you it is not normal to the human consciousness. Now, to understand Humbly, let's return one more time to the most perfect short story that I believe has ever been told. And it's the story of your life and mine, whether male or female. It's the story of the prodigal. And we'll pick up on the prodigal after he or she decided to leave the pig pen. You know where the pig pen is? Okay. He said, I will go home and say to my father, Father, I have sinned against both heaven and you. I have fallen short of my spiritual condition, and I have not fulfilled my responsibilities in my human condition. And I'm no longer worthy of being called your son. Please take me on as a hired hand. That's humility. The son saying, please take me on as a hired hand. No bargaining. No rationalizing. And so he returned home to his father, and while he was still a long distance away, his father saw him coming and was filled with loving pity and ran and embraced him and kissed him. And his son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and you, and I am not worthy of being called your son. Now that really is humility, because when his father ran out to kiss him and fell on him, that was the time that under normal circumstances he would have started putting a con job on the old man. Right? Right then he would have known he had him. One more time he would have said, all I need is enough to pay off my debts. That really weren't my fault. I ran into a bunch of thieves back there who took it from me. But he didn't do that. He did not do that. And he didn't ask for anything except to be taken into what? Into his spiritual condition. That was all he was asking. To be restored to his father's house, but not in a position of prominence as a hired hand, which means to begin at the beginning. Beginning with level flight, not as a smart aleck mystic. Not as a good Christian, hired hand. Now, because he didn't ask for anything, he received everything. But his father said to the slaves, quick, bring the finest robe in the house and put it on him, and a jeweled ring for his finger and shoes, and kill the calf that we have in the fattening pen. We must celebrate with a feast. And I promise you that was something to celebrate. When that happens to one of us, any one of us, the universe begins to sing and smile, and it says just what the Father said. He was lost and is found. And so the party began. He was being restored to his right mind. A mother who is here tonight told me the story of her 2 sons. It happened just a few weeks ago. I'll change their names and I'll make them anonymous, and you'll understand why in a moment. One Saturday night, Ken, that's not his name, the 8-year-old, at bedtime, she was in tucking the 2 boys in. And Ken said, I wish I knew what to do about my thumb sucking. He said, I wake up in the morning and it's there. He said, I don't know how to stop it. He said, if I keep on, my teeth will stick out. You see, you and I are never going to stop anything until we see that if we keep on, that something's going to happen. And Matt, that's not his name, his 9-year-old brother, said, I know what you mean. He said, I'd like to stop wetting the bed, too. He said, I still do it, and I don't like it. And one reason he didn't like it was that he was sleeping without a pillow that was still wet from last night. You see, until we begin to experience the consequences of our unacceptable behavior, unacceptable to us, until our behavior becomes unacceptable to us, are we going to do anything about it? Are we going to make any adjustments or corrections? Are we going to say, fix me? Now, I can identify with both of them, because when I was their age, I sucked my thumb and wet the bed both. And they took me to a doctor who gave me some green pills, and that just turned everything green. That was just... Nothing changed. Now, their mom said you can do something if you'll ask God, if you're really serious, and if each night you'll ask Him for help with your problem, and if you'll thank Him for all the fun time that you've had that day, and if you'll really believe, expect it to happen, it will. And the next morning she went in to awaken them, and they got down on their knees and they asked God, and when she went in to awaken them on Sunday morning, Ken wasn't sucking his thumb, and Matt had not wet the bed. And when they awakened and realized what had happened, they jumped up grinning from ear to ear and said, Mom, it works. It really works. It really does. And they came to Sunday school that day, and the lesson was on the 11th power of the mind, or renunciation, elimination. Our power to say no to what we don't want. You have the power in you to say no to what you don't want, and yes to what you do want. And their mom was very wise, and she told them, she said, I've been working very hard on a problem that I had. Staying out of bed. And at the afternoon class I told this story, and someone later said, you mean she had a problem of getting up? I said, no, staying out of bed. Because their dad left every morning for the office at 7 o'clock, and by 7:10 she was back in bed. And she told the boys, she said, I asked God to help me. It didn't work right away, but it got better each day, and she said, now I stay up all the time. And you see, when we begin to work on one of these serious conditions in our lives, you will have a dramatic release of that problem, but then it'll try to come back, and when it does, redouble your efforts. I'll explain that a little more deeply in a moment. Redouble those efforts. Now, what is asking? Is asking saying, pass the potatoes or the salt? Is that what asking really means? In Mark, the 11th chapter, Jesus again was talking to his disciples, and they had passed the fig tree that was withered. They were on their way back, and they saw it, and they marveled at what had happened. And he told them that if you will ask God for anything, it will be done. Anything. He said, if you have faith in God, truly I say to you that whosoever says to this mountain, be taken up and cast into the sea, and does not doubt in his heart, but believes that what he says will come to pass, it will be done. Therefore I tell you, whatever you ask in prayer, believe that you receive it, and you will. Now, is that just the word asking? No. The kind of asking that's going to change us in a permanent way, that's going to heal us no matter what the condition, that kind of spiritual asking requires the conscious use of thinking and feeling simultaneously. It's reaching out with all of you, every part of you, from the very depth of you. Listen to Carl Jung again. We should not pretend to understand the world only by the intellect. We apprehend it just as much by feeling. Therefore, the judgment of the intellect is at best only half of truth and must, if it be honest, also come to an understanding of its inadequacy. We have tried to find this experience by thinking, by reading books, and that's very important and necessary and cannot be done unless we pursue our spiritual quest with that side of our mind. But that side must also realize that it of itself can do nothing. That along with that, one must begin to release the most intense feeling imaginable. It's a venture, again that Jung said, which requires us to commit ourselves with our whole being. Can you and I, who have been so sterile with our feeling, who have not said I love or I feel, and who have stood up tall and straight in our dignity, and say, God, give me this experience? No. Can we have it? Asking is reaching out with everything in you, holding nothing in reserve, imaging and feeling. You see, we have been, if you ask someone for the keys to the car to go to the corner and back, the moment that you ask, you have in your mind an image, the picture that they will hand you the keys, and you know that you're going to the corner and back. You have a general idea of the experience that's about to happen. Otherwise, you would not have asked. You're not about to get caught asking for something that you know with all your heart a person is not going to give you. Think about it. You already know what the answer is almost every time you ask, and if they say no, you're shocked and stunned and hurt and go off and stick your thumb in your mouth. Right? You bet. Now, when we begin to ask in prayer, what do we expect? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. We're caught up imaging the problem, thinking about the problem, feeling the problem, and expecting it to continue. We expect the bed to be wet in the morning when we awaken, and the thumb to be in the mouth. No, imaging, one must see and continue to see that the solution is unfolding. Let me read to you another story that is just fantastic, and it has to do with our feeling nature. Remember that in the Bible, in the Scriptures, a woman always means how you feel about things, your feminine feeling nature. And a widow is the feeling nature that has been hurt. It thinks it has lost something. Now, this is the story about a widow and a judge. And one day Jesus told his disciples a story to illustrate their need for constant prayer and to show them that they must keep praying until the answer comes. There was a city judge, he said, a very godless man who had great contempt for everyone. A widow of that city came to him frequently to appeal for justice against a man who had harmed her. The judge ignored her for a while, but eventually she got on his nerves. I fear neither God nor man, he said to himself, but this woman bugs me. It says bothers me, but it's the same thing. I'm going to see that she gets justice. Whatever it is she wants, I'm going to give it to her. For she is wearing me out with her constant coming. And then the master teacher said, if even an evil judge can be worn down like that, don't you think that God will surely give justice to his people who plead with him day and night? Yes. He will answer them quickly. Now, we don't have to keep going back to God day and night to change God's mind. We keep doing this to change ours. Because the moment we begin to believe it, we begin to experience it. And that is the law. It cannot be any other way. A number of years ago, a very dear friend of mine, a man who was and is a powerful figure in the business community. He considered himself to be an intellect hard to reach. He was cold, unsmiling. And his life was a reflection of those attitudes. But something happened to him one time, and he began to change, and his whole life changed. He came into this experience as the result of these very steps that we're working with now. he changed and his life changed. But he brought forward with him a sickness, an illness from the past, migraine headaches. He'd been to Johns Hopkins, other places, had sought the best medical attention. He still had migraine headaches regularly. One day he came home from his office and told his wife, "Zoe, I'm going in the bedroom. I'm going to get down on my knees," and that was an unnatural position for this man in his life. And he said, "I am not going to get up until I am healed, until God heals me." And he got down and began to, with all of his heart, he said, "Please heal me." And he felt it, and he felt it. The tears began to flow. The feeling was so intense. Because this was a need. He said, "I cannot live my life this way, and it's not necessary." He said about 10 minutes later, he felt the pressure on his back. Gentle, firm, but it pushed him down into the mattress of that bed. He could feel himself sinking into it. And he could feel so much love that he could hardly bear it. And the pressure left his head, his mind. His headache was gone. He stood up to leave the room, and he later told me, he said, "Jack, you will not understand this, but anyone who has ever had a migraine will." As I walked out of the room, I knew that I would never have a headache again as long as I lived. He said, always in the past, when the headache left, I was waiting for it to return. I wondered when it would happen the next time. I knew, always have known, that it was not gone. He said, this time I knew it. And from that day to this, he has not had a migraine. I know because I checked on him before I told you about it. You can become a new person with a new experience, an exalted experience, lifted up into your spiritual consciousness and dignity. But you must ask for it with feeling, and you must image it and know that it's coming to pass, and keep knowing it until you experience it. And in this week, let this be our experience together. In closing, let me read to you a prayer by Peter Marshall, the new man. I know, Father, that I must come to you just as I am. But I also know that I dare not go away just as I came. Often I've known failure. Failure in the moral realm, failure in ethics, failure in my attitudes, failure in my disposition. I have confessed all these defeats to you, and you have graciously forgiven me. Yet I know, God, that merely to forgive me will not suffice. For unless I am changed, I shall do these same things again. At last I know, God, that only you can correct that within me which makes me do wrong. Where I am blind, you must give me sight. Where I fail to heed your voice, you will have to do something about my deafness. Even where I deliberately choose to do what I know is wrong, you will have to do something about my will. So, God, I acknowledge my total dependence upon you. Make me over into the person you want me to be, so that I may yet find that destiny for which you did give me birth. And for his help, that Holy Spirit, who is plenteous in mercy, I give you my gratitude. Thank you, Father.